let's get started. Oh, we're pretty late today. So let's do this. We're continuing our conversation about the state pattern. And what do I want to start with? So I already said everything I need to say about the state pattern. You have all the information you need to do the AO task. Today's more just reinforcement, just another example. I'm not going to do live coding with this one. We're going to use a more complex example that don't really have time to live code. In the previous lecture, we got pretty far off track and just started talking about other stuff. So I'm open to getting sidetracked. Since there's no content that is an absolute must to cover today, you have, like I said, you have everything you need to complete the entire course at this point. So state pattern, we will talk about it though. And then next week are these review lectures. These are the ones that are up for a vote on Piazza. So let's talk about what's happening next week and what those votes are looking like. We'll head over to Piazza in a second. That Monday of finals week is canceled. I don't know what to even do with that lecture. It's during finals. Prepare for your finals. Or more realistically, if you have any programming tasks to finish up, that's when you should be finishing them. A few things I want to talk about with this, because I'm starting to get the emails. Of course, it might not be any of y'all, but I'm starting to get the emails asking for extensions. The answer is no. There will not be any extensions to the programming tasks, and I think it's crazy to even ask for that. So let me give a little insight into the course design of why these deadlines are here. Since they're learning objectives and you have to complete every learning objective to pass the class, I have to decide when the final deadline to be able to finish these tasks to pass the class. When should that deadline be? And there are a lot of choices. I bounced around a lot of different options for that. And I decided, you know what? I'm going to give them as much time as I can possibly give the most generous deadline and put it at the end of the last day of classes. That way they have maximum time and they can have all the time they want to finish their programming tests. So I don't feel too bad. I give you all the time you can possibly have to finish those tasks. So I can say you have to finish these, but you have all semester. I can't push it any further back than that. I don't know why people are asking me. Well, I know why, but I guess I'm not even surprised, but it's wild. Anyway, looking back and reflecting on this, I think this was a mistake. This allowed students and even encouraged students to get way too far behind. I think next semester, all the final deadlines, I think, will be 1 week after the late deadline. And if you don't complete it 1 week after the late deadline, I send you an email and say, thanks for trying, you can try again, play again next semester. I think that's the way it really has to be, because I saw too many students who probably would have passed the class, allowed themselves to get too far behind, focused on other courses because they were relying on this deadline. So I think that was a mistake from the course design level, but no, definitely no extensions. That's crazy. Given that background, that's where I'm coming from. When somebody asks me for an extension, I'm like, I already extended it as much as I possibly could. Without going into finals week, we're actually not supposed to have anything due after the last day of classes because you're supposed to be focused on finals. That's a university thing that some professors don't follow, but I like to stick to that. After the last day of classes, the whole semester shifts into finals mode. There should be no take-home work after that. So I do stick to that. So this is the last possible minute that I could possibly have the deadline. No extensions after that. And then on a little more lighter note, the final exam, I'm still getting questions about the final exam. Even after I answered them in the previous lecture, I still got the question in chat. But how should we prepare for 220, 250? I'll give that a good answer. I'll finish this up first though. The final exam, if you finish all 3 quizzes, all 3 interviews, there's no reason for you to show up to the final exam. There's nothing for you there. There's nothing that will affect your grade. If you do want to show up to just get some extra practice, that's fine. I'm not gonna stop you. I'll have a few extras printed out. Usually 0 to 2 people take me up on that. So I probably won't have too many extras printed out. So if 20 of you show up wanting to take it, I might run out of extras, but you already passed the class. I could share the PDF with you. Oh, no, I can't do that. Pretend I didn't say that. I am not sharing the PDF with y'all. I can't do that. But I'd figure out something. Maybe during the exam, I'd go print out another copy for you. If you're actually there for practice and interested in learning, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to do what I can for you. On the other side, if you do need to take the final exam, you only take what you need from the final. So the final exam will have all 3 quizzes, all 3 interviews. And say you passed all the interviews and you passed the quizzes 1 and 3, but didn't pass quiz 2. Quiz 2 is the only thing you didn't get done during the first 2 attempts. And that's the only reason you need to show up to the final exam. You show up to the final exam, you ignore the other 5 parts and only do the quiz 2 part. You only do the things that you need to make up. You don't have to take the entire thing just because you missed one thing throughout the semester. Bless you. If you need 5 out of the 6, you do those 5 out of the 6. You only do the ones that you need. Yeah. So the final exam is going to be all paper-based. I'm going to throw a regular old-fashioned paper exam at you. You're going to pull out a pen and do it all. That means your memory diagrams, you'll have to freehand the entire memory diagram. And for the interviews, it's going to be interview-style questions, and you'll have a big blank spot for your answer. You're going to write at like paragraph form. Just write out your answers to the interview questions. Both of those things, I think, are good things. I don't know. So I think there were some. I don't want to think this. I don't want to believe this is the case, but I think some students did poorly on some quizzes because of the tracing tool, that it just didn't gel well with them. So anybody who didn't get it on the first 2 attempts with the tracing tool, might do better pen and paper. And same with interview style questions. I do want everybody getting practice with the one-on-one interviews, but if you got the practice still with the first 2 attempts and just whatever it is, face-to-face didn't work out for a student, that last attempt being pen and paper might help some students as well. So I mean, my assumption of anybody walking into the final exam needing that, whatever happened the first 2 attempts didn't gel with them. So, I mean, the short answer is it's just logistically what I can do on the final. But I see both of those as positives. I have no need to change that. Yeah. Sorry, I can't hear you. Is it possible to observe the correction? Wait. Correction of what? To view the correction of the previous quizzes? You can always go to office hours and we'll go through the solutions with you if that's what you mean. You can view your submission as well. But if you want to know what the correct solution is, if you go to office hours, any TA or myself will be happy to go through the solutions and exactly what you did wrong. So yeah, the feedback can sometimes be pretty vague. But if you go to office hours, we'll spend all kinds of time with you. But I won't release electronic solutions. This is the one thing I won't do. But go to office hours, will help you out. How about a deadline for all tasks be before the resign date, excluding the ones that are after? Some students really need that extended deadline relief. It's sad to be being ruined for them by others. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. I don't want to take up too much lecture time. I mean, unless that's what y'all want to hear. But yeah, having all the ones before be at the resign deadline, I feel like we'd have the same problem just at the resign deadline. Here's what, oh my goodness, I can't hang on to that thing. Let's pick on one of these tasks. Let's do tasks. How about test 4? Test 4 is where things start getting turned up a little bit, where the heat starts coming. So let's pick on test 4. So let's do test 5. I want to get away from break because break kind of throws things off a little bit. Let's do test 5. So test 5, let's open up quite a few weeks here. So test 5 where you're supposed to be doing task 5, where I would expect you all to be doing and completing task 5 is during week 8, right? Like, I'm covering trees, the homework's on trees, during the week where I'm telling you exactly how to do the task. That's when you should be working on it. And then the question is, okay, when should the expected deadline, like when do I actually expect you to be done with it? Wednesday morning is when I would expect you to, like everybody to be done with that assignment. That's when everybody in the class should be done working on task 5. That's the expectation. I've moved that to Friday. It used to be Wednesday. I did move it to Friday to give 2 extra days, just so you can have a full week of office hours. You have the previous Friday plus the whole week, a whole week of office hours after all the content's been covered. I guess I'm off by a few hours there, 9 to start of lecture. I guess technically you don't have those ones, but I moved that to Friday just to be, a little more lenient with people who want to go to office hours and get some extra help. Everybody should be done with it absolutely by then. That's a week after the content. We've covered a whole nother week of content with usually a whole nother task being covered. So if you're needing all the way up until that expected deadline, you're already a whole week behind in the class. And that's hard to make up. It's hard to catch up from that, especially if you're focused on task 5 while I'm covering, this is another bad example because task 6 content would be right here. If I'm covering task 6 content and your mind's on task 5, you're ignoring task 6. And now when you start task 6, you weren't paying attention to that week of lecture, at least not 100%. You might have showed up, you might have kind of half listened or something, but you're not 100% aware of it. And I should stop using generalities like that. Those of you still coming to lecture this late, maybe you're the people paying attention to everything, students paying attention to everything, and don't really need this talk. But task 5, that's where you absolutely should be done with it. I think that's already pretty generous. There's discussion. Paul and I, who co-teach in each spring, we've had discussions of having that deadline Monday morning, the week after content. So we cover the content for that, and then before the next lecture of content starts, so the beginning of the next lecture, that's when you should be done with that task. And I think that's reasonable, but not really practical. Like, I think that's a reasonable expectation. If somebody's showing up to our class, like, I'm here to learn computer science, that's when you're going to be done with that task. Let's be real with that. So this is already pretty generous. We go a week later, which this one I did leave it Wednesday, mostly so the late deadlines don't interfere with the next expected deadline, because I expect you to, if you need one of the late deadlines, you'll complete the assignment by that late deadline, and then you still have 2 days to get caught back up and get back on the expected deadline track. That's what I want with that. These could be moved to Wednesday, but I kind of like the late deadlines not interfering with the expected deadlines. And then what we're talking about is a week after that, which let's say we put it on Friday, a week after that would be the final deadline. So that's my proposal. That's what I'm leaning towards for next semester, that this would be the final deadline. So if we're covering task 5 content, and it's a little off because there's a week without a task here, but if I'm covering task 6 content here, task 7 content here, task 8 content here, which with the week of no task puts us at task 7. But I'm talking about graphs potentially, and somebody's still working on trees on task 5 when I'm talking about finishing task 8. And even with this, I'm talking about finishing task 7 and somebody's still working on task 5. I don't think that student can catch back up. Like, I think that's too far behind that you're going to fail the course anyway. I think the final deadline should be right there to make it very explicit. Like, look, nobody's caught up who's fallen this far behind in the past, which I want to review all the data after this semester, now that students have allowed themselves to get very far behind. I want to look at the data and see if any of them can actually catch up if they're that far behind. But with the data, I can say, look, nobody's caught up. Nobody can do, like, 116 is too hard of a class for that. You can't do that because you're trying to do task 5, and then in a couple of weeks, doing 6, 7, and 8, like you basically have to turn into a completely different student. Somebody who's taken 3, 4 whole weeks to do task 5 isn't going to be able to do 6, 7, and 8 in the same amount of time. It's not going to happen. So that's why I want that late deadline, that final deadline earlier. This was a neat experiment, I guess, but it's not working in practice. That said, we have another week left. Maybe a lot of students will surprise me, but I'm not holding my breath on that. So I spent more time on that than I wanted to, but that's where I'm thinking. I've been talking with the TAs about this and trying to figure out how to change this for next semester, because I think there's going to be a lot of students who are going to fail this semester who might not have failed if I had more strict deadlines than everything due at the end. What I actually thought was that the application objectives would be enough of an incentive that everybody would stay on track. But too many people said, screw it, I'll just wait till the end of the semester. And we're not incentivized by application objectives, which I kind of get. In hindsight, I get. You have another course that has a midterm, and 116 is saying, hey, you can get 1 to 2 AOs. It's just completely out of weight. It's completely unweighted when you're weighing against other courses that have really intense 30% of your grade on one day. You're going to focus on that. So I get it, but I got to change my strategy here to set you up to pass. Okay, maybe like partial AOs each week. Someone does it early. I mean, that's kind of what I have right now. You get 2 AOs, then 1 AO, then 0 AOs. Or you mean, I think I know what you mean. Because after the late deadline, the minute after the late deadline or the last day of classes is the same. It's 0 AOs. So maybe wait that each week. I see what you're saying. Maybe, but some guy will finish all the tasks early and end up with 50 AOs. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'd have to balance it and everything. But having something between the late deadline and final deadline, I think the final deadline just got to come up a week after the late deadline. I think it's the only thing that really gets all the features that we need in the course. Yeah.
So the way the application objective has is structured, is it supposed to be like an extra credit, or is it supposed to be like a pass?
That depends on how you want to look at it. I see it as a kind of a makeup for somebody who's going for an A but missed more than 2 application objectives earlier in the semester. So if you knocked everything else out of the park and you already are lined up for an A, you can skip it. Which I don't know if I really want it to be like that. I knew going into the semester that's what it was going to be, but I don't know, I might change that in the future. Maybe just make it worth 6 AOs, and then you need to at least get half of that assignment done to get your A.
Yeah, I was just confused because like throughout the grade, you were saying that like each grade has like a 4 application objective question, right? But like the application objective task in the syllabus is part of the evaluation for the final grade. So for the A, if like the application objective was like extra assignment to like replace a programming task, you only have a 2 application objective question instead of the 4.
Sure. Yeah, the 4 question is including that AO task, yes.
Okay. So that's I was just confused because I was
Yeah,
sure like it was.
Yeah, it's not extra. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's not extra credit. It's part of the course, but it does end up being optional if you have, everything else in line. Yeah, it's not intended to be optional. It's just if you have your AOs lined up in a certain way, if you got everything else everywhere else in the course, or even if you missed 2 application objectives elsewhere in the course, it ends up being optional. Not intended. There's 34 total, including that AO task. Oh, and this number, I think I mentioned this like the first day of classes, but this 4 AO buffer here, and then lecture questions are worth 4 is not a mistake. I always, basically taking attendance is what lecture questions are. If somebody really knows their stuff and walks in and says, why do I have to show up to class? You don't. If you are good enough to get everything on the first try, I'm not forcing you to be here. But anyway, that's a side point. All right. So December 11/15 are the judgment. Oh, yeah. Yep. I'll probably, Monday, December 11th, I'll probably stay up till after midnight. And then once midnight hits, I'll do all my final processing because I'm always interested in how things turn out. We'll see, who got there and who didn't and everything. And then, December 15th. December 15th isn't, neither of these really are judgment days, only if you fell really far behind. And can we be, like the final exam, can we be real for 1 minute? Like what other class gives you 3 chances to do a single frickin' quiz? Like I get heat for being too generous with that quite often. Like why am I giving you 3 chances to pass one fucking thing? It's like just study and prepare, man. Like I don't know. If you can't do it in 3 chances, you definitely deserve to. Let me not word it that way. You should spend another semester with me learning this stuff. You're not ready for 220, 250. They clearly know what they're doing. Not necessarily. The students who finish a lot of the assignments, like day 1, some of them are students retaking the course. So if I give you bonus points for getting things done really early, it's going to be students retaking it who just submit all their stuff from last semester. Find out what tweaks I made to each assignment, make those tweaks, and get them done. Oh, this is the one that's going on YouTube, too. I shouldn't rant in this lecture. Out of curiosity, what happens to students who end the semester with just 4 AOs? Will they be able to handle the class like 220, 250? Is it only 4 AOs that I made to pass? No, yeah, 4 AOs to pass. Yeah, no, so it used to be 0. I thought I made it higher than 4. But it used to be 0 AOs to pass. If you got all your LOs, like that's what it should be. If you got all of your learning objectives, if you completed the learning objectives of a course, you should pass. You should move on to the next course. I did up it from 0 that starting this semester. Again, on the other side of the lecture question thing, if you can't even handle showing up to lecture, you should spend more time here. But there's no reason to not get some AOs. The reason I did up this from 0 and make you get at least some AOs is to encourage students to get on track. Because I was really afraid of the scenario that is happening. Too many students relying on that final deadline of the last day of classes. And that is still happening even with this as non-0. So I think maybe this should even be higher, or I got to do the final deadlines, the final deadlines earlier, and maybe this can go back down to 0. I don't know. I'll think about it over the winter break. But yeah, I think somebody with 4 AOs, like most of the AOs are just timing things. So if you were able to complete all the LOs by the end of the semester, and this is the idea, the whole course structure is based on this mastery-based learning, kind of by accident. Paul told me, I was just doing this, and Paul told me what the name was for it. But where here's what you need to know, here are the learning objectives. I don't care how long it takes you to learn this stuff, as long as you get there by the end of the semester. And then the AOs are like timing points. If you kept on track, you get an A. But as long as you got there in the end, you can still pass the class and move on to the next semester. Because it makes sense to me. Like, I don't care if you learned it halfway through the semester or the final week. Maybe somebody trying to catch up on all the tasks, it'll just hit them. Like, they'll have an epiphany next Monday. They'll be like, oh my God, it's all just makes sense now. They just crank out all the tasks right away. It can happen. And that should be allowed. But I'll look at the data once it's all said and done, see if anybody actually has that epiphany. If no one does, these deadlines got to move. But yeah, I think someone with 4 AOs, depending on the exact situation, but if they earnestly know all of the quiz, interview, and task material, then yeah, I don't care when they learned it. I wish the AO extra credit thing was separated. I think I just dropped a grade because of that confusion. What do you mean? AO extra credit thing? There's definitely nowhere in any of this where I use the term extra credit. extra or even credit. I don't think I ever used that term. Oh, I do. Oh, only during the AI portion. Like I don't use those terms. Or points. I don't think I ever used the word points for what it's worth. If you've heard the words extra credit, that didn't come from me. But yeah, how should we prepare? I didn't forget about that. How should we prepare from 220 to 50? I just want to wrap up this conversation, which I'm going to do by just moving on. How to prepare for 220 to 50? Knowing your 116 stuff, for sure. I feel like I've gone through this, but I guess it's worth repeating because it's definitely on your minds more right now than it was last time I mentioned this, and it might have been in the other lecture. I don't remember. So. Preparing for 220, 250, I'll separate these down. For 220, your memory diagrams. Oh my goodness, your memory diagrams. If you struggled on the quizzes, if you just kind of got by on the quizzes and got into 220, go back and study those things. Every memory diagram we did, know that stuff inside and out. If you don't, you're going to have a rough time getting started in 220 because 220 it's all about that low-level programming. It's about memory management. If you don't understand how Java does memory management, you will not understand how C does memory management. You're not just going to have what I call references in Java. C is going to have references and pointers. The way Java uses references are like pointers in C. And then you'll have another thing called references, which you kind of have to retrain your brain to think references is a little bit different thing, that can have memory addresses that can even refer to other variables on the stack, which is, can get a little strange at times. So your stack, instead of just having the at and then some number, or OX and then some number on the heap, you'll have those OX and then some number on the stack as well, and keeping track of all that memory. And as things get more complex, you can't just say new object. C doesn't have objects. You can't just say new object and there's memory allocated on the heap for you. You have to ask the operating system, hey, give me 20 bytes of memory on the heap. Give me 20 bytes of heap space and manage your own memory like that. So you really have to go way down that rabbit hole of memory diagrams. So understanding the memory diagrams in 116 when they are basically trivial compared to what's ahead of you. They're not easy, don't get me wrong, they're not easy, but they're trivial compared to what's ahead of you. There's a lot more that you have to do. You really have to understand that stuff. So that's where I would start. And if you're good with the memory diagrams, start learning some C++, or not C++, C syntax. Can't hurt. The first week of the course, kind of like we do a crash course in Java at the beginning of 116, they'll do a crash course in C at the beginning of that semester. But if you come in with a little bit of C practice under your belt, especially if you've been practicing pointers and references, because that's the really new topic that's going to trip everyone up. And if you can really go far, memory management, study malloc, memory allocation, would really get you ahead and help those first few weeks be a bit easier of a transition for you. For 250, it's going to be your OOP stuff. And for both courses, testing, of course. I've talked about testing all semester. I don't think I have to harp on that anymore. Both courses do require some amounts of testing these days, just because nobody was testing after 116 unless you're forced to. So, and then not everybody, but a lot of students fail. When they wouldn't fail, if they just wrote some damn tests and used the debugger. But knowing how to test, they'll require some testing, but not as much as 116. I require pretty thorough testing across all tasks because this is where you're learning how to test. They're going to start easing up on that because you're expected to just know how to test and know how to debug. But they do require some these days. But knowing how to test without being forced to will be a skill that you really need to develop at some point in your career. Preferably this semester. Hopefully you've already had that and didn't just rely on Autolab to tell you if you did good testing or not. Anyway, I didn't mean to go down testing rant for the 100th time. The OOP stuff and the data structures, of course, you have to understand that data structure stuff. Some of it will be reviewed in 250. They'll come up with linked lists. They'll say, this is a linked list, this is a graph, this is a tree. but they're not going to spend a whole week talking about the structure of these things and basic algorithms on it. They'll spend a little bit of time like, here's linked list, you've seen this in 116. Now let's analyze the runtime of algorithms on this thing. And that's where you'll go into all the runtime stuff, the big O stuff, analyzing actual runtime on the database operations. That's where you're going to spend a lot of time. And then algorithms on those data structures. Did I say databases? Data structures, and analyzing the runtime of each of those algorithms. That's where you're going to go. So if you're still struggling with how a linked list works and how it's laid out in memory, you're going to have a bad time going into 250. Trees, graphs, same thing. OOP is going to be a big thing. You're going to represent all those data structures using OOP in Java, using generics and all that good stuff that we talked about. So just making sure you're up to speed on really all of the 116 material. I think I've said this before in this lecture, but we've cut the content that isn't required in 220, 250. Like concurrency and functional programming were the two big topics that were cut because neither of those courses needed that content. And by the time you got in a course that needed that content, you already forgot it. So we're really down to the things you need for next semester in this course. So it's really all of 116. I thought there was one more thing I had to say about that, but maybe I didn't. Yeah. 191? What about it? You're taking 191 next semester? I don't know, take additional courses. 191, most students take 191 with 116. I think you can all confirm this, that 116 is by far the harder course, I believe. Is that the consensus? Mostly, not quite. Not as much consensus as I expected, actually. But tipping that way. I rarely have a student say I fell behind in 116 because 191 was kicking my ass. I'll hear Calc 2 was kicking your ass. I'll hear that fairly often, but rarely 191. Yeah. I don't know off the top of my head. My information might be a little old for this, but I think it's been every other week. Like they might have changed by now, but I think they did every other week, and then 250 was every other week, and they tried to be on the opposite schedules, last I recall. But that might be outdated. A lot. A lot. Like 2 weeks. That's a good answer. A lot. I think this is a good question that I like to tell y'all. I'll tell y'all right now. Ask your TAs about this stuff because they've been through these courses recently, and they'll tell you. I'll cede what they're going to say if you do ask them. Is it's way more intense than 116. Like this is a little baby course compared to 220 or 250 individually. If you're taking 220, 250 together, and you struggled through 116, like get ready for it. A lot of time, in short. Just the handout descriptions for 220 are intense. Like I don't know what the opinion is on my descriptions. I think they're pretty concise. I think they're fairly concise. But if you think mine are long, you haven't seen anything yet. They'll get intense. Like it'll take you a while just to parse through the whole handout for the homework. Especially for 220, because Ethan wrote them and he gets kind of verbose sometimes and defines everything in a good way, in my opinion. I'm not sure how much they are in 250, but yeah, things get intense. Not to scare you. I don't want to scare you at all. Like, I do a little bit, but I want to set your expectations reasonably. I don't want to be like, you'll all be fine next semester. If you cruise through 116, you should be doing okay. If you struggle through 116, I don't have a good way to finish that sentence. That won't get me in trouble. Prepare over the winter break. There we go. Yeah.
So like with 220 and 250, you make it sound like in that course, you actually have the chance to get like crucified or something like that, straight up. Just like you beat it.
Yeah.
It's not as there isn't a chance to recover as much versus like 116.
No, and I believe they're both. I think I'm the only one. Well, me and Paul are the only ones who do like the AOLO stuff. They're percentage based. There's going to be one deadline. It's going to be back to like a regular course structure in that sense, and that deadline's going to come and go. And if it runs you over without you getting a good score, like you can't make up those points. It's the only reason. By the way, the only reason I have 3 deadlines is and 3 chances at each quiz is because you have to know this stuff. Like it's a learning objective. You have to know it. You have to complete it to pass the course. If I didn't do the LOAO stuff and I had percentage-based grading, it would be 1 chance at each quiz, 1 chance at each interview. The expected deadline would be the only deadline, and everything would just be whatever your score is, average it all together, and that's your score in the end. That's what the deadlines would be. The only reason I have these deadlines is because it's the LOAO stuff. So they're going to do the same thing that I would do if I did 116 as percentage-based again. Is the deadline comes, the deadline goes, with or without you. If you get a 0 on that, that 0 is just averaged in. Oh, and midterms and required exams. I should probably go to required exams. But, yep.
Are you looking to hire TAs from people from the semester?
I don't know yet. I have to look at the numbers still. And the 115 instructors didn't get to me how many 115 TAs I'm going to inherit from them. But once I have all those numbers, I'll decide, which has to happen very soon. If you are interested, if anyone's interested in being a TA, shoot me an email, and I'll at least note down to send you an email when I know more. But if I have to hire like more than a couple TAs, I'll make a post on Piazza, invite applications. Yeah, 250. Did I not mention that? 250 is in Java. Starting this semester, it's in Java. Am I allowed to share 116 lecture slides with friends in other universities? Yeah, I mean, it's all public on the internet. If they want to check out the slides, that's fine. Send them CSE116.com. I would not be as happy if they took those and like presented them. I did have an instructor at another university presenting my material and stealing my homework assignments and everything. That I'm not okay with. But I make my sites public because I want anybody to take advantage. If you're learning computer science, I want anybody to be able to access that. If they're okay with that? Wait, what do you mean? Oh, somebody, I forget how, somebody let me know. Like I got an email. Somebody said, you should check this out. I forget how they found out. But it was cut and paste, like my syllabus and everything. It was just cut and paste. It was weird. They stopped after. It was a whole thing, though. How much do TAs get paid? I don't want to say the wrong thing. Ask one of the TAs. I don't want to say the wrong number. Because it's different. So it's different based on how much experience you have as a TA. So the TAs who've been TAing for a few years get more than the first semester TAs. I forget what all the numbers are. Yep. I don't know. You'd have to ask the instructors of those courses. Some instructors do like to lock down their stuff, mostly because they don't want to open themselves to what I had happen, where somebody just ripped off my whole course. So some do lock it down a little more. But I don't know who has what policy these days. I don't keep track. I used to know, but I don't know. Plus, they change their mind sometimes. All right, well, we got less than 10 minutes. All right, so review week voting. Let's talk about what we're doing next week. I talked about this a bit in lecture Wednesday, so let's rip through a little of this. The Minecraft Redstone tutorial, I am pounding this off to TAs. So one of the 3 lectures, once they get back to me which one they want to do, I'll have them come in. They know about Redstone and told me all about how to do it. And I said, y'all could just do the lecture. So they're going to do the thing. I'll do the other 2. Code review of some real-world code you've done, including real-world testing and documentation. So this will be fun. I'm looking forward to that. If the voting, by the way, if you don't like how the voting is coming down, I'll keep checking this until Monday. And if there's a big shakeup at the last minute, there usually isn't each semester, but if somebody wants to rally a certain topic, there's still an option for that. But this is what the current vote is looking like. Code review, I'll just show off some projects, some code that I've done, and just kind of parade it and walk through it and explain it all. That'll be fun. And Git and GitHub, this is less fun, but I'll do what I can to make this fun. I talked about this on Wednesday, so I won't rehash everything I said that time. But I'll do what I can to make this fun. I think I can make this a pretty fun lecture, and I'll focus on like real applications of Git and GitHub instead of a first lecture on Git and GitHub. I'll try to tune it to that. But I don't know exactly what I want to do, but I'll do something good. I'll make it good. And we had a few new ones, but no new voting. Okay. Oh, good, yeah, 220 right there. Is the whole course in a repo? Sweet. All right, let's go through this quickly. So here's Jumper. It's a super fun game. For anyone asks, just because I know you will, and you should. I'm not making all the code of this available, but there's a Jumper No Physics repo in my GitHub that you can get all of this without a physics engine. The only reason I do that is because physics engine is an old homework that I might revive one day, and I don't want the solutions out there. But it does rely on those physics. So here I'm jumping up, and my goal is to jump faster than the other player, and the other player reached the bottom of the screen, so they died. I won the game, but there's no like end of game state because I just test the jump when I'm playing this thing. But the way this works is if I'm standing still and I jump, I hit the jump button and I jump. Boop. Pretty neat. If I hold the jump button, so I'm doing full jumps at this point, if I just tap the jump button, I'm going to jump lower. If I'm running and jumping, I'm going to jump higher. So here's a full running jump. If I turn around mid-air, I'm going to slow down. I'm going a certain x velocity, and then when I turn around mid-air, I slow down, and I can double jump. Even if I walk off a ledge, I can use up one double jump, but if I mash jump while in the air, I only double jump one time. All right, so I think I got all the features there. And I kind of recommend this. I have to recommend it because it's what I clearly did and do, is every time you have a state transition, print to the screen that there was a state transition. Like in the constructor of each state, print out that, hey, you're in this state now. It can help for debugging, having this log of every different state. If you're playing with your calculator and you can see whenever you hit a state transition, it can help you just see what's going on, visualize what's going on with your code. So that's Jumper. Let's get to the good bits. Left, right, up, ADW. I didn't play with the second character. I just used the arrows there. But two players using different sets of keys. Here's the spec sheet. Our states, when you're standing, walking, jumping, falling, or dead, you're going to have different sets of behavior in all of these states. We don't have a ton of time to go through them. I want to get to the good bits here. But those are the states where each one has a different set of behavior, whether it's the jump height, whether it's your movement speed, left and right, whether you fall onto a platform or jump up through a platform. It's going to be different behavior. And then all their state transitions between those states. And this is one where I think there's a better argument for the state pattern. If you have two devs, one saying we should use the state pattern here, and one saying I'm never using the state pattern in my life, they can actually have a healthy debate on what you should use for this one. And either side might win. I'm not going to say the state pattern is the answer here, but I would like the state pattern for this one. This is one where it's reasonable to take advantage of the benefits of the state pattern. And here's my state diagram. If I'm standing and I press left or right, I'm going to go to the walking state, release it, I'm going back to standing, hit the jump button, I'm rising. One place, if you look through the code in the repo, I do have some of the code in the examples repo already. This is a spot where I do use an if statement. So this isn't pure state pattern. This is a little too complex for banning control flow completely. So I do use a conditional here to check if I hit the apex, and then hit the apex going into the falling state, hit a platform, go back to standing, and whenever you reach the bottom of the screen, go to game over, which overrides all of the button presses and releases to do nothing at all. Just disables all your inputs. Okay. Bless you. And we can go back to inheritance, like the first inheritance days when I first motivated what inheritance is before we had polymorphism. And notice that standing and walking both have a lot of common functionality that we can factor out into an on-ground abstract class, code everything that's common between them here, and then only do standing specific and walking specific behavior in each of these states. So we can save ourselves some coding and code duplication by going back to inheritance and factoring out common functionality. Same with rising and falling. The only difference is you fall on a platform, or you rise up through a platform and you fall on a platform. So those methods can just say what happens when we hit a platform, and then the in-air state takes care of everything else, like moving direction in midair, having that be slower or faster. And then we want to add the double jump. This is the bit I want to talk about. 2 minutes, we got this. We want to add a double jump with all of that. With poor design, this could be very difficult. If you have a whole mess of code, especially if you do kind of the natural beginner thing where you put everything in one big method and or at least one big class. You have to have separate methods for the key presses. Well, actually, maybe you don't. You could have one method that takes the current key states, which keys are up and down, and then just does everything. If the left button is pressed and the right button is not pressed, you could have a whole mess of code. And then somebody says, I want double jumps in my game. And you got to go open up that, probably a couple hundred lines of code at least, method, and try to add a double jump is going to be tricky, to say the least. And you could do this. You could do this with a conditional, with a flag, if you've used the double jump, and say, if I've used the double jump, then jump again, which would be okay. It might even be the better solution. As long as you do this in the in-air state, this might be the way to go. But we're going to embrace the state pattern completely and add new states. So if I'm in the air and I hit the jump button, I want to use a double jump. So we're going to hit that extra jump and then transition to a state that's going to extend, like